There are two things that are more important to customers when they're purchasing candles than anything else: scent and scent. In fact, the NCA, or National Candle Association, reports that fragrance by far is the most important consideration when customers are purchasing candles, and more importantly, what brings customers back. After all, what's the point of a scented candle if you can't smell it? But I don't need to tell you that. Instead, let's talk about what leads to good scent throw and how to achieve it. The key is to not overcomplicate it. Coming up. Hi everyone, my name is Wade. I'm the owner of Black Tie Barn, and my channel and videos are all dedicated to making candles and running my small business. If any of that interests you, I would love to have you around for future videos and to check out all the past videos on the channel. So please consider hitting the subscribe button below. And if you enjoy this channel and this video, please give it a thumbs up as well. And a big shout out to Crafty Base for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so let's talk about scent throw, specifically hot throw, which is how strong your candle is when burning. If you are new to candle making, there's basically two types of scent or fragrance throw that we as candle makers are concerned about. Well, and actually customers are as concerned about as well. And that is cold throw, which is how strong your candle smells when it's not burning. So if you are shopping on the shelves in a store and you open up the candle, how good does it smell just by itself? That is cold throw. Hot throw, which is what we're focusing on today, is how well your candle fragrance fills the air while it's burning. As I mentioned, scent and scent throw are the most important considerations for customers. Now, of course, there are many other factors that customers do care about when it comes to candles. These days, customers care about aesthetics, home decor, the shape, the size, the style, the color, the design, as well as seasonal appeal, price, and so on. But scent is king. So over the next several minutes, I'm going to break down what contributes to scent throw and offer you some tips on insight on how to potentially improve it. Now, some of these are very obvious, but I want to address them because this channel has a mix of both experienced and new candle makers. So bear with me as we get through all of the factors that contribute, at least the major factors that contribute to scent throw. Number one is the size of your jar. Now, I know what you're thinking, duh, but sometimes that's not always so obvious. A lot of people think size of a jar is the entire size or volume of the jar, but we're specifically talking about the diameter. So the width of your jar, because that is what determines the size of the melt pool, the melted wax on the surface of your candle. And the melted wax is what contributes or leads to the fragrance escaping from your wax and into the air. So a larger or wider jar means a larger or wider melt pool, which means a stronger fragrance throw. Most of the time. Ultimately, the size of your jar really does dictate the strength of your fragrance in the air. A very small jar like this would be great for something like a bathroom, whereas something like this might be great for a medium-sized room. And then you get something that's a little bit wider like this, could be for a medium, a larger size room, and then you've got larger, I don't have any with me, but larger like 3-wick jars that are really meant for open spaces or large rooms. So the size of your jar really does impact the amount of fragrance throw in the air. If you want your scent to reach further or stronger, then consider a larger jar. Number two, proper wicking. Now this video is not even going to scratch the surface of wicking. I've got a lot of videos on this channel talking about wicking, as wicking is easily the most difficult part about candle making. But proper wicking does contribute to scent throw. Now I'm not saying specifically one wick or wick type is going to give you a better throw than the other. That's very speculative and very subjective. However, there are different wick types that work better with certain waxes, and you want to make sure your wick is sized appropriate for your jar, because the whole goal, the purpose of the wick, is to provide the proper size flame that generates a proper size melt pool for your jar. So it goes hand in hand with the melt pool and of course the size of your jar. The key point is that a proper wicked jar will lead to a proper burning candle, which leads to a better melt pool and better scent throw. Now number three is just as big of a factor as the other two, and that is your wax type. Now this is a stickler for many because a lot of people start off with a wax that they first experienced and they either never change or they just don't want to experiment with other waxes, which is totally fine. However, wax is a huge factor when it comes to scent throw. The reason is because different wax types release fragrance better or worse than others. You've got paraffin waxes, soy waxes, palm waxes, beeswax, coconut waxes, and then different blends of those, parasoy, coconut soy, or paraffin coconut, beeswax and soy, apricot. There's just so many types of waxes, and they all have pros and cons. Some waxes have a great advantage with scent throw, but maybe suffer in other areas, whereas other waxes are great waxes in some areas, but not as great with scent throw. So it's really about experimenting and choosing the wax that is best for you. And what is best for you might be different for other people. Scent throw might be important to you, but maybe not as important as some other factor. It's really up to you to decide. But the fact is, wax type really plays an important part of fragrance throw. Many of you that have experimented with different wax types can attest to this. The wax with the best hot throw doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best wax for you, but it is very important to know that wax plays a major part. Number 4, fragrance quality. Candle making is a great craft and it can lead to a great business. So suppliers are all over the place. And these suppliers, specifically talking about fragrance oils, offer a range of different options. It could be different types of scents or oils for different purposes and oils with different concentrations. For the most part, most of your suppliers are going to be offering great quality fragrance oils. However, there are concentration level differences, and so it is important to choose a fragrance supplier that you trust and that you have sampled first. So start with some of your samples, and if you trust the quality of these fragrance oils, or you know that they're a trusted company, then you should be in fine shape. However, if you are finding fragrance oils that are much cheaper than everything else that you're finding on the market on average, and you're not really getting great results when using them, there's a chance that they're just not great quality fragrance oils. So there's no way for me to really give you a definitive idea of what a good quality fragrance oil is. A lot of it does come down to testing, but the point is the quality of your fragrance oil does play a part. Now, next, and probably more obvious to many of you candle makers, is the fragrance load. So we've talked about the quality of the fragrance oil, but the fragrance percentage, the amount of fragrance you're using in your wax and in your candles, obviously is important as well. These days, waxes can hold anywhere from 5% up to even 15% fragrance load. I think there's even some that hold more, but more oil doesn't always mean better scent throw. So it's important when testing to kind of figure out where that point of diminishing returns is. For example, if you notice great results using 8 or 9 or 10%, and then you add 12% and you're not noticing much of a difference, well, that's a point of diminishing returns. You're adding more fragrance oil, which means more cost, but not necessarily improving your hot throw. Start with something kind of in the middle. Use the supplier recommendations of the wax that you're using and how much fragrance they recommend for that wax. Use that as your baseline, and then you can adjust from there. But a lot of times, if your wax can hold anywhere from 5% up to 10%, and you're around 6% not getting great results, try 8, for example. But the most important part is just kind of staying in the range of the recommendations, and just know that the fragrance load obviously does play a part in the strength of your candle. But again, sometimes less is more, and more doesn't always mean more. Number 6. Now, I touched on this a little bit when I talked about the size of your jar, but it is something that I think goes undiscussed or non-discussed too often, and that is location, location, location. What do I mean by that? Where you're burning your candle has a huge impact on the scent throw and the strength of that candle. Like I said, if you're burning a candle in a bathroom, well, you might have a really strong burning candle. But then you take that same small candle and move it to a large open space area, you might barely smell it. So you need to keep that in mind when judging your hot throw. Are you using a candle that is sized appropriately for the size of the room that you're testing it in? Well, if you judge a small candle like this in a bathroom versus an open space, you're going to get different results. And you can't compare this candle to a candle like this in 2 different size rooms. It's just not apples to apples, right? So keep location in mind, but not just the size of the room or the size of the space that you're burning your candle in, but also the airflow. So if you're using a candle in a kitchen, many of you have range hoods and other kind of ventilation in the kitchen. You've got ovens, you've got cooking, you've got a lot of things going on in a kitchen that it can be really hard to judge the fragrance throw sometimes of a candle inside of a kitchen. However, in the living room where you don't have as many scent or smell to compete with, you do have drafts from your AC running or your heat is on. And anytime you've got other circulating air in the house, it can affect the scent throw. Because with air circulation, it's pumping air in through AC and then sucking it back out through the return vents. And that can affect how your candle is smelling and filling the air. You want to keep your candle away from these vents and these drafts because not only can it cause it to burn kind of funny and cause your wick to dance around and cause some smoke and soot, but it can also affect how well you smell your candle. So again, location, location, location. Try to pick the best spot to test your candles and try to be consistent with it. Number 7 is process and consistency. Now this one is a tough one, and it's really hard to talk about because it really does depend on so many factors. Your wax, your wick, your jars, your space that you're making your candles in. But everyone's process can differ a little bit, and it will, again, depend on your type of wax. You might be adding your fragrance oil at a different temperature than someone else is. You might be pouring your candle at a different temperature than someone else is. And your recipes are going to differ. Most people will start with manufacturer or supplier recommendations, but then others will deviate and kind of come up with their own process. The most important part is to document your process though, and your recipes, because if you have too many variables changing, it can be really hard to determine what part of your recipe or your process is affecting your scent throw, whether in a good way or a bad way. And this is a great time to mention the sponsor of today's video, which is Crafty Base. Many of you know I've used this product or software for a long time. I've got other videos, which I will link in the description below, giving you an overview of how Crafty Base works. But it does a lot of things like expense tracking and order tracking and raw material inventory, stock taking, or your finished goods inventory. It also helps you build recipes, price your products, and many other things, which again, I will have videos to those resources. However, the reason Crafty Base can help with this part as far as process and recipes is because Crafty Base actually helps you track and document your exact recipes for each product. Not just candles, but any handcraft for that matter. And it can do it on different batch sizes. So if you have a process and a recipe that works great for you, you can program it and add it into Crafty Base, and then you can follow that exact recipe to a T every single time for consistency. And then if you notice later on that something changes and you're not getting the results that you want, and you can go back to the drawing board and test, but you've got a baseline recipe to work with, and then you know exactly what you might need to tweak or change, one variable at a time to get the results you're after. And then you can even document inside of Crafty Base the details and some notes about what you changed and why and what the test results were. So Crafty Base is great in a lot of different ways, but it can really help you with consistency by helping you track and manage your recipes and your processes. Thank you again, Crafty Base, for sponsoring today's video. And again, check them out in the description below. I will have a link to Crafty Base as well as a link to an overview video of me showing you basically different ways you can use the software. And number 8, which I'm going to mention almost reluctantly, is cure time. Now, if you are new to candle making, cure time is after you've made your candle, how long you let the candle cure before you actually burn it. The reason I say reluctantly is there's not a whole lot of scientific evidence or proof that cure time actually matters when it comes to candle making. It really comes from the soap making world. However, it has made its way into candle making over the years. Now, I say there's not a lot of scientific evidence backing cure time, but there is a lot of subjective human feedback that does say that cure time can help. I will leave that up to you to decide, and I will say that it really probably depends on your wax type as well. A lot of waxes, its cure time really doesn't make a difference at all, and other waxes you might find some results, specifically with waxes like soy wax. So people that use a lot of soy wax will swear that if you let the candle sit for a week or two, you will get a better scent throw. There are wildly different opinions on whether this is true or not. So again, you can decide that for yourself. I'm not here to say that's right or wrong, yes or no. Honestly, I'm not sure. It's hard to trust my own nose sometimes. I will say there is a benefit in waiting. Now you might be thinking, well, waiting and cure time is the same thing. Well, I say it for different reasons. Yes, waiting, there's no harm in waiting because sure, cure time might help. There's no harm in trying it, but more importantly, just wait. Get yourself a break away from your product, away from your candle, away from that smell. Come back to it in a week where you're not so nose blind to it and see if you get the same results. And a lot of times that's really all you needed was a chance to get away from your product and to smell other scents before going back to this one. So before judging a candle too harshly or deeming a certain fragrance a failure, take a few days, step back away from it, come back a little bit later and give it another shot. See if you still feel the same way. So a few additional tips that kind of surround some of these factors that we talked about. First is to size your candles appropriately. If you are using a small jar and wanting more fragrance throw, well then try a larger jar. I know that's self-explanatory, but sometimes that's all it takes. And similarly related to that is multi-wicking your candle. If you're going from a smaller jar to a larger jar and still trying to do it with one wick, try using 2 or 3 wicks if it's necessary. Not only will it help your candle burn better, but it will also give you a faster melt pool, which will give you faster, stronger scent throw. Now, if you've tried some other changes and you're still having a consistent problem getting good scent throw, then you might want to experiment with a different wax. If you're using a wax that no matter what other changes you make are not giving you the result that you want, then it might be time to give another wax a shot. Next, use some test groups. Don't always rely on your own judgment. Now, I know this isn't a way to improve your hot throw, but it might improve your perspective on your hot throw because sometimes your hot throw is fine and you just think it's not. So let others give you some feedback too and let you know if you really do have a true problem with scent throw or maybe it's just you. Now, this one's sort of related to sizing your candles appropriately, but next on your website or wherever you're selling your candles, recommend different size candles for different spaces or different room sizes. If your customers know that this type of candle works best in a small room like a bathroom, this one works best in a medium-sized room or a large room or an open space, let your customers know that. That way you're setting the proper expectation and they're not bringing a candle home thinking, man, this candle is way too light, I can barely smell it, or this candle is way too much for the size of this room. set the correct expectations, and you'll get better results. All right, the last tip I have for you, and probably the most important one, is be selective about your fragrance oils. There are so many fragrance oils out there and so many suppliers, hundreds of thousands of fragrance oils. You don't have to use the first one you try. Sometimes it's easy for us to get so hooked on a certain scent because we love it so much, and then it's just not really working for us. Sometimes the scent just isn't that strong. Sometimes that oil just doesn't work great with your wax. So test a lot of oils and then be selective on the ones you choose. A lot of people wonder with certain waxes that are kind of notoriously bad about good scent throw, why some companies using that wax always have good, strong candles. The reason is that they're selective about the fragrance oils they use. They've used a lot of oils and they just weed out the ones that don't work well and they keep the ones that do. If you're selective about your fragrance oils, then every candle you have is going to have a great hot throw. So be picky. It's your product. Choose the ones that work best for you. All right, so I know a lot of what I mentioned is common knowledge to experienced candle makers. And if you're brand new to candle making, then a lot of this might seem like overwhelming information. But the truth is it's not near as complicated as we try to make it. Keeping it simple is often the best solution. Now, while candles really are little complex systems, there are 4 major factors that contribute to fragrance or scent throw: jar size, wax type, proper wicking, and fragrance oil. So let's focus on those 4. Wider jar means a wider melt pool, which means more scent throw. Wax type. Well, as I talked about, some waxes release fragrance better than others. Proper wicking will create a properly burning candle, which means a properly sized melt pool, more fragrance throw. And fragrance oil. Quality fragrance oils that pair well with your wax. The issue is that often we just try to force things to happen. We really want something to work because we love a particular scent, and so we just try to make it work. But sometimes, if it's not giving you the result that you want, you're not getting the scent throw that you're after, it's just time to move on. Otherwise, you'll just drive yourself crazy. First, decide what you don't want to change, that you're unwilling to change. For example, you might be stuck with your wax type and your wax jar and you want to use those 2 products. Well, then the rest just comes to experimenting with proper wicking and your fragrance oils. Be selective on your fragrance oils. And if you're more willing to negotiate with other items, then you can try different waxes in different jars. Change what you're willing to change, but try to be selective and stop trying to force a square peg into a round hole. There are plenty of materials and products out there. You can find the ones that work well together. All right, so I'll leave you with this. I realize that a lot of this seems like oversimplification. Candle making is more complicated than it appears to be. I think anyone who's made candles before can attest to that. But that doesn't mean it has to be as complicated as we often make it. Sometimes it's just about finding the right ingredients that work well together. It's just like baking. It's all about the ingredients and process, and tweaking both until you get the best candle. Check out this next video, which dives deeper into helping you simplify your candle making processes and formulas. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.